It is Monday, August 11th, 2025. Welcome back to Hang Up and Listen, the sports podcast here at Slate. Back with you yet again. I'm Alex Kirshner. I'm a contributing writer here at Slate, and I co-host Split Zone Duo, a college football podcast. Big show for you this week. We're going to start with a Dallas Cowboys beat reporter, stopping by to explain how Jerry Jones has found himself on one side of one of the most toxic public negotiations with a star player in recent NFL history. No, not that one, or that one. Or that one. We'll talk about an unusual ownership and relocation dispute in the WNBA, which taps into all kinds of modern sports business dynamics. And we'll talk about the fall of the gender barrier in Major League umpiring over the weekend. Big news in a series in Atlanta. As usual, joining me this week to talk about all of it is Lindsay Gibbs, the publisher of Power Plays, a newsletter that covers the biggest stories of the moment in women's sports. Lindsay, how are you?
I'm doing great, Alex. How are you, though, is the biggest question.
I'm doing great. We both had weddings over the weekend.
Yeah, but mine, I was a +1, and yours, you were the groom. So I think
that was your wedding. It's a little
Alex
different.
Alex is married. Congratulations, Alex.
Woo! Thank you.
Sorry, ladies. He's taken.
That's right. Yeah. I'm imbued with all kinds of wisdom now.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's all kinds of things that I can tell you that 2 days ago I couldn't tell you.
I see a little more gray in your hair, a little.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so no bad takes will ever come out of this mouth again, knowing what I now know about the institution of marriage. Also joining us this week is Ben Lindbergh, a senior editor for The Ringer, also married. So he's got, years of wisdom, the things that
It's
Ben
true.
knows. A senior editor for The Ringer and co-host of Effectively Wild. How are you?
I'm okay. I didn't get to take a hang-up honeymoon, though, immediately following the weekend of my wedding. So this is special and quite a commitment to podcasting. Yeah. And I'm the only one of us who didn't attend or star in a wedding this weekend, so I don't have any great personal accomplishments to report. But I did want to shout out someone else's in honor of former Hang-Up host Stefan Fatsis, who wrote a book about being a kicker and also has another book about dictionaries coming out in 2 months. I must mention a milestone kick in football. All eyes were on Travis Hunter in the Jacksonville Jaguars preseason debut, but kicker Cam Little stole the show by drilling a 70-yard field goal, which would have been a record in a regular season game. 8 kickers have attempted 70-yarders in NFL games. All have failed until now. Little nailed this one with some distance to spare, which only reinforces my belief that the uprights should be narrowed before football becomes a game about getting possession and immediately turning the ball over to the kicker, which at this point I think we're a few years away from.
It has completely changed the sport that touchbacks take you out farther down the field and you only need to go 35-ish yards now to be in range for a typical NFL kicker. That's not the way it was drawn up. Yeah, it's not the way it was drawn up. I will say, last wedding note, one of my good buddies and business partners is a Jacksonville Jaguars fan, and I'm a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, the opponent in that preseason game. And we discussed beforehand that there would be no discussion at the event of what was happening in the preseason Jaguars-Steelers game. It was a matter of self-respect.
Yeah.
But he did...
I feel good for your wife. That's good. That's probably a good call, Alex. Yeah.
Probably so, but he did wait until the after party to tell me about the 70-yard field goal, which I was pleased to know about because it's a 70-yard field goal. And you don't want to be behind on those kinds of things.
That's some of the wedding wisdom that you gleaned from this weekend.
That's exactly it.
No Steelers talk.
Before we get into our business, as always, we do want to say thank you to our Slate Plus members for making this show possible. Subscribing helps us make the show, of course. It allows you to get the show ad-free, which is a great perk, and you also get bonus segments. And there is good news that we have one of those live right now for Slate Plus members. It's about a rare thing in the NFL, the Kansas City Chiefs not being favored to win the Super Bowl. You can hear that episode right now as long as you are a Slate Plus member. Subscribe by going to Apple Podcasts and clicking Try Free at the top of our show page, or visit slate.com/hangupplus to get access wherever you listen. Tough contract battles between teams and players are not the dominion of one NFL franchise, but Jerry Jones and the Dallas Cowboys have had a knack for it over the years. Jones has had public, acrimonious fights with elite players like Emmitt Smith and Michael Irvin in the 90s, and Zeke Elliott, Zach Martin, and CeeDee Lamb just in the past handful of years. The thing those disputes have mostly had in common is that the Cowboys seem to lose them, eventually handing over record contracts that appear to shade in the players' favor. And yet here Jones is, doing it again, this time with Micah Parsons, one of the most productive young edge rushers in football history. He's 26. He's in the last year of his rookie deal. He's had at least 12 sacks in all 4 NFL seasons, and he's rarely missed games, and he's obviously in line for a market-resetting contract for a sack getter. And yet, not only has Parsons been slow-walking training camp, as the Cowboys have yet to reach a deal with him, but things have gotten very ugly. He accused the team of working around his agent and trying to deal with him directly, saying the Cowboys misinterpreted a conversation he had with Jones many months ago. He's asked for a trade, which can be overcome, and Jones has told fans not to lose any sleep over it, but you still don't want it. And that was more than a week ago, and we are still not done. The saga could end any time, but I wonder what it says that it hasn't yet. And so we welcome RJ Ochoa, who covers the Cowboys in detail for Blogging the Boys at SB Nation. RJ, is Jones just a devoted capitalist who can't resist getting into a high-stakes negotiation just because he kind of loves the back and forth? And is he going to fork over that cash again at the end of it? Or is there a deeper plan at play here? And I ask that with the full acknowledgement that by the time you're listening to this, who knows, maybe it'll be over.
It's great to be with you. And this question is difficult to answer, particularly if you look at life through the lens of logic. And I think that that's what leads to most debates about this subject, because so many people are coming from a standpoint of they're clearly doing this, they're clearly doing that. And I think that we're so deep into the rabbit hole that life is different. This is like, in Multiverse of Madness, that one universe where they were like origami shapes. Like you just have to recognize the reality is not fair or is not rational. I think at this point, the two theories that hold the most water, not that I would have landed on these if not for all this time passed, are that the Cowboys love the attention, that they, will devote X amount of salary cap space that is effectively lost because you drag out these deals, right? You could have signed Micah for less if you had done it in a more proactive manner. And the same goes for Dak or CD or whoever. But it's worth that quote unquote investment to lead First Take, to lead SportsCenter, to be the lead topic beyond what you already would be as the Dallas Cowboys. And the other matter, the other hypothetical or hypothesis, and I'm not a financial analyst, so I can't speak to this in great detail, but some people have dug into the Joneses' financial standings and suggest that they may not have the liquid cash to affront a signing bonus to be able to handle that type of money, and that they're waiting for some sort of influx from other subsidiaries or other financial investments or opportunities they have to just simply get that actual money, because NFL teams are worth so much nowadays that we're seeing all these ownership groups bring in different firms or bring in different partners so that they can front those signing bonuses. But the Joneses, as valuable as they're worth, they simply can't handle the wealth of a multi-billion-dollar company. Nobody can. The people who can obviously are very, very, very finite. So this is very frustrating and very predictable, and that doesn't make it any less frustrating, but it makes it, great reality television, and that's why so many people are interested.
Yeah, if it isn't the former, if it isn't just the philosophy that there's no such thing as bad publicity, and if we can't be loved, then being hated is the next best thing, which I think Jerry Jones has said as much. If it is more about the money, in this case and previous cases, it seems like Jones is just negotiating against himself, that it hasn't actually saved him money in the long run. Is this just that Jerry Jones is a relic? He's trying to bypass the agent, do business directly with the player as if it's the 90s and he's still negotiating with Emmitt Smith or Troy Aikman? I
think that's relative to Micah, certainly part of it, right? And we're seeing that. But where I have, and other people who cover the Cowboys have challenged that is, okay, let's live in this, dimension of Doctor Strange's multiverse, right? Like, let's pretend that there really was this sacred conversation that happened between Jerry and Micah over Pepsi's or whatever product the Cowboys are shelling out now. Where is it? Right? Like this whole thing stems from an alleged conversation that happened between Jerry and Micah. And it is a conversation or a contractual conversation that is so serious, or was regarded to be so serious by Jerry himself. If that is the case, then why was the paperwork not handled the very next day? Because this conversation allegedly occurred in March. And here we sit now in the middle of August, and no terms of what that deal were have emerged. No specifics, no details, no anything. But this supposedly happened and was ironclad. And, they swore a blood oath over what this was ultimately going to be. And now we have to hold Micah to that. So I find the suggestion that this deal existed, to be silly. But I do believe that the process of it all is a Jerry ism, is trying to flex the come up to my office, sit on my fancy couch, and, let me tell you the same stories that I tell the media each and every time, because I can't justify anything I'm doing nowadays. All I have is the opportunity to put a spotlight on where we succeeded in the past. By the way, my Netflix special on that comes out next week.
Yeah, the Netflix special. It's hard to ignore the that looming over this, and like you said, how much publicity gets in that. Do you think, is this Jerry Jones playing chess?
I appreciate the question, but is it really playing chess if we're all able to see it? Right? Like, you know what I mean? An annoyance for me in life is when somebody will suggest something that everyone agrees with and present it as a unique idea. Be like, look, I don't know about y'all, but I think The Office is the greatest show of all time, type thing. And so, okay, we understand that you have a Netflix special coming out. And so we understand you want some publicity around this. But again, I go through this cycle every day myself, but they would be the lead story no matter what, right? Like even if this didn't exist, like, is it really worth the fraction of more attention that you're getting? Are you really devoted to just absorbing all of the oxygen in the room? And maybe they are. It's difficult to refute that at this point. I used to refute that. I used to challenge that they would, do this and do that, but the results kind of speak for themselves. And Alex, you mentioned Emmitt Smith and Michael Irvin in your open, where I would offer that those things are different is those predate something very important relative to the logic of all of this. The 2011 CBA in the NFL introduced the rookie wage scale, which introduced the opportunity to capitalize or to be more prudent with how you build your roster. And we have yet to really ever see the Cowboys capitalize on players in that time. We're talking now almost a decade and a half running since then.
Yeah.
And there have been multiple CBAs obviously since then, but the Cowboys simply do not know or are unwilling to learn how or unwilling to acknowledge that they know how to put together the puzzle in this specific realm.
RJ, I know that this is the decades old Cowboys thing. Is Jerry able to be a general manager and the owner? I mean, obviously he'd say yes, and it doesn't really matter what anyone else thinks. But do you think that this situation would have played differently over the last few years, even if Jones is still an extremely empowered, hands-on owner? If the person actually running the team was, frankly, more of a spreadsheets person, more of a capologist, more of a get what you can out of every dollar type of executive, of the type that runs, well, every other NFL team in 2025.
Yeah, I would also add to your list of qualities or would-be qualities, someone who has, consequences to not performing well, right? Because that's the case here, right? Like Jerry doesn't have consequences. If they fail, it's not like he's going to fire himself. And so I would claim to be an expert on the Cowboys, but I'm not an NFL general manager.
I think your bona fides on the Cowboys are strong.
But
yes.
But to that point, like I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I could run an NFL team. But these things are so layman's terms now, right? Like the average NFL fan is so smart, and even if they're not smart, they have access to shows like yours or different YouTube channels or whatever that can explain these things and break these things down. And that's why people toss out the idea that they being the Cowboys are incompetent or they're bad at this. And I reject those now because not out of some sort of defense of them, but nobody can be this incompetent. Nobody can be this blind to what is completely and totally in front of their faces. And so I think the power structure within the Cowboys, with Jerry being the owner and the general manager, allows for him to override and overrule any would-be logic. Because the idea that there's nobody in the building who understands this philosophy or this phenomenon is silly to me, right? There are definitely people who not only reconcile with the fact that this whole pomp and circumstance is very silly and annoying and petulant and small, but it's also hazardous and cancerous to the idea of building a team. Micah was a first-round draft pick in 2021. And if there was ever a first-round draft pick in any year ever who proved that he was eligible for an extension at the moment he could get it, it was certainly Micah Parsons. There are now 2022 first-round draft picks who have gotten contract extensions with their team. The New York Jets have two of them. Like, the New York Jets are a more functional franchise than the Dallas Cowboys in this regard. And the, just craziness on top of it all is they continue to set themselves further and further behind the eight ball. I repeat that Micah was eligible for an extension last year, but the Cowboys are playing catch up on Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb. And because they're dragging this thing out with Micah, they're missing the boat on getting ahead of deals for Tyler Smith, for DeRon Bland, for George Pickens, who they traded for. They traded for George Pickens entering a contract year while he is represented by the same agent who represents Micah Parsons and David Mulugheta, the one whose name Jerry doesn't claim to even know or understand. Brandon Aubrey, their all-world kicker. Like, at some point you have to, mow the yard if you waited a month and get it back to ground zero. But the Cowboys just let it grow and grow and grow, and we're all living in the jungle.
Maybe the real 4D chess interpretation is that Jerry's actually trying to bring the locker room together against him. It's the team against the owner kind of bonding. It has amused me how just everyone is treating this like theater, and Parsons and his teammates, many of whom have been through this exact same situation, have spoken up in support of him. So you had CeeDee Lamb tweeting, "Never fails, dog." You had Dak Prescott saying, ultimately going off the history of what I've seen, he will get paid. What is slightly different about this situation is that Parsons is the first of the recent Cowboys holdouts to actually request a trade, which in the past has been seen as sort of a nuclear option. But we've seen that this offseason all over the league, with Matthew Stafford and Myles Garrett, for instance, requesting trades to another team, then subsequently signing with the same team. And Jones himself seemed unfazed by this. He said, "This is negotiation." So I wonder whether the trade request as a sports institution has just had its teeth pulled out, has just become pro forma posturing. And if so, does it even exert any real pressure on a team to publicly request a trade?
I think that's a great point, and it is what makes this situation different. If you follow the Cowboys even from a casual perspective, I think you could have anticipated that Micah would always be different. And I say that in absolutely zero disrespectful manner. Like, he is a different person. He has a podcast, right? Like, he is a different kind of operator than Dak Prescott or CeeDee Lamb. Either Dak or CeeDee could have made things way more difficult for the Cowboys in their negotiation process last year. And I say that understanding that CeeDee Lamb literally held out. But Micah has always marched to the beat of a different drum. He's always been very vocal. And to your point, though, while it is somewhat commonplace across the NFL for there to be trade requests, it isn't common for the Dallas Cowboys. You have to get kind of funky to say, well, this was the last time there was a trade request, and especially in modern times, right? Like, you can go back to the mid 90s or the late 90s and find an example, but this simply does not happen. And so for the best player on your team to do this while he has this arching army of support, again, to your point, really, I've said for a few weeks now, it's difficult to condense into, 140 or 280 characters or whatever. But, Micah began his contract negotiations this year in a very different way than either Dak or CeeDee last year. Micah had the court of public opinion much more behind him. I think that people knew and understood the way the Cowboys operated last year, but Dak is a volatile and, toxic subject for people because he's the quarterback of the Cowboys. You have some people, he's not worth it, whatever. CeeDee held out, and that caused the olds of the world to say, you need to show up and honor your contract and be a good soldier and blah, blah, blah. But everybody, when Micah began this whole process, said, yeah, they're being stupid. Like, this is, and Micah, even as great as we view CeeDee Lamb to be, or if you think Dak Prescott's awesome, Micah is unquestionably better than both of them. And so to play this song and dance with the best player on your team in this situation, I mean, there might be like 4 people in the world, but there is nobody who is, Team Jones on this that thinks they're handling this correctly.
I mean, he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. Like, that's going to happen. And he's 26.
So from the outside, like, I kind of enjoy when the Cowboys are a flaming hot pile of Cheetos. It's entertaining. How are fans feeling going into this season?
That's a complicated question, and I think it's important to understand the way things felt after the 2023 season ended. In case you forgot, the Cowboys were the 2 seed in the NFC. They were undefeated at home. That was the year Dak finished second in MVP voting. CeeDee broke every franchise record from a receiving standpoint. And I would offer that most fans had coped themselves into saying, all right, the 49ers are going to blast us in the conference championship game, but we're going to get there. Like, we're good enough. We're going to get to the conference championship and we'll get that monkey off our back and, you know, whatever. Like, I mean, the fan base had placed this ceiling on themselves, which is really sad and pathetic. And the Cowboys got their doors blown off in the wild card round by the Packers and quickly. I mean, everyone had to kind of sit on that for like 3/4 of a game. And the offseason that followed, the entire 2024 calendar year, was so much intentional sabotage and toxic decision making from ownership. They kept Mike McCarthy in a lame duck year. They, inhibited any opportunity he had for success. Whether you think Mike McCarthy is great or not, it was not kind at the very least to do to him. They brought Mike Zimmer back after being out of the NFL for a long time and podcasting with Deion Sanders. Jerry Jones claimed they would be all in, and then they had a notoriously infamous offseason of inactivity in which their biggest move was bringing Zeke Elliott back and trying to pitch to the fan base that this was a great idea. Get to the season, you have Jerry arguing with radio hosts. You have the sun being an ever-present factor in games. And then to cap it all off, you have the Eagles winning their second Super Bowl, proving that they are masters of the thing that the Cowboys refuse to even acknowledge is a relevant thing. So I think that the entire 2024 calendar year, I think that's relevant because it really built this callus up for a lot of fans. It really caused a lot of fans to check out in a different way. And I don't say that in any sort of form of naivete, like, oh, things are really changing, y'all, watch out. But I think that the Cowboys will forever be a part of people's lives. They'll watch, they'll smoke their pulled pork, they'll make their nachos, and it'll be just their normal ritual. But everyone kind of understands that you're the new Washington franchise. Like, this is your Dan Snyder. Like, you're waiting and watching that happen across the 2024 year, them getting bailed out specifically because they got new ownership. It really just kind of underscored what this was. And the coaching search, I don't mean to be long-winded, I apologize, that landed with Brian Schottenheimer, was a really, really, really tough moment. Now, he's done a lot to try to help himself and improve the team, but he's had every moment of serious power undercut from him because of this whole Micah Parsons situation. So they did build up some, I won't say a lot, but some goodwill this past offseason, particularly with trading for George Pickens. But the moment that either Jerry or Steven spoke at training camp this year just undid it all. I mean, they truly cannot help themselves but upset people. I mean, they really, they feel like this is their world. And to be fair, it is. I mean, they're the ones who own the team and they get to make the decisions, and we're just kind of trapped and strapped in for the ride.
Never thought I'd be so happy to be a Panthers fan, you know?
Yeah, I would add, just to close, you mentioned that you enjoy when the Cowboys are a hot mess. And I know we've kind of equated them to being theater in this conversation. They're not, this isn't like your favorite Broadway play that's like quality. Like they're the Fast and Furious franchise, right? Like,
oh yeah.
Oh wow, the cars are still fast, and you're gonna go to outer space this time. This isn't it sells, and there are tickets, and I remain impressed and grateful as somebody who covers the team that they're as popular as they are. But as an example, I don't know if any of you saw, but on Saturday ahead of the preseason opener, Dak Prescott told Stan Kroenke, hey, we'll meet y'all in the NFC Championship game, which is an incredibly,
the Rams, yeah,
it's incredibly innocuous thing, right? Like essentially saying like, let's hope the best for both of us and that we can meet at the latest possible destination. A very normal thing. But the fan base has been so broken and is in such a toxic place that ever since then, in the 72 hours, people have been arguing about whether he should have said this and how it's stupid for him to believe it. And how could he say this with Micah Parsons being in the middle of these extension negotiations? So, this is, the best time of year, but, we're sort of Matt Damon in the meme, just kind of embracing the chaos of it all and understanding this is our life.
RJ Ochoa, you can find his work at www.bloggingtheboys.com on the SB Nation Network, from whence I came many years ago. RJ, there's not enough Cowboys talk nationally. We appreciate you filling the void for us this week and giving our listeners a chance to hear about a team that they probably couldn't hear about if they turned on ESPN. We appreciate you coming on.
Small mom and pop shop. Thanks again, guys.
Up next, a really unusual ownership squabble in pro basketball.
Hi, it's Willa Paskin, the host of Decoder Ring. And we have a new episode for you all about an article of faith for many Americans.
It's shocking to me that there's this idea that all Britons have bad teeth. This is not a fringe opinion.
It certainly is not.
Why don't you get your teeth fixed?
I live in Britain. I don't want to stand out.
Well, British people have notoriously bad teeth, so...
But does the stereotype about British people have any validity? And if not, why do we think it does?
I was quite keen to sort of dispel that because it's a bit irritating, Americans always thinking their teeth are brilliant.
Might there be something equally strange about American teeth?
They look very, fake. Yeah. Whereas here, I've always had patients tell me, oh, don't make my dentures too white. They actually call it horse teeth.
Find out on Slate's Decoder Ring, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Earlier this summer, a minority owner of the Boston Celtics made a deal to buy the WNBA's Connecticut Sun for a record $325 million, with a pledge to put another $100 million into a practice facility, and with a specific intention attached to that, which was to move the Sun from Uncasville, Connecticut, to Boston. The Associated Press reported that the move could come as quickly as the 2027 season. But then came the WNBA league office with a bit of a not-so-fast, my friend moment. A league spokesperson told The Athletic that relocation decisions are made by the WNBA's owners collectively, not by individual teams. And moreover, prospective owners in 9 other cities had already formally pitched the WNBA on adding teams in the future, and there's no Boston group as part of that mix. This deal still hasn't closed, and it's not clear that it would close if the league and the new buyer didn't agree on the geography of it all. So, Lindsay, what happened here? Did someone get ahead of the apple cart? Did the new buyer, Steve Pagliuca, think that the record sale price would just allow him to do whatever he wanted? Is this just a mess?
Yes, that would be, I think, all of the above. This was reported at the beginning of the week as I got news alerts, as I'm sure many people did. WNBA, Connecticut Sun, moved to Boston, sold record price, that $325 million, plus another $100 million for a practice facility. Congratulations to the Mohegan Sun tribe, which owns the Connecticut Sun and bought it for $10 million back in 2002, I believe. That's a pretty good return on profit. $10 million to $325 million. Not too shabby, but
yeah, it's beating inflation.
Yeah. I think it does outpace your high yield savings account a little bit. But I think what we've come to learn is that this could just be one of the great what ifs in WNBA history, or we could really be seeing the Connecticut Sun in Boston under Steve Pagliuca, I think is how you say his name, who is the lead investor and buyer in this $325 million deal. Or we could see the Sun moved to Hartford under a different former NBA owner, or we could see the Sun in Boston with the current Celtics owner, Bill Chisholm, or we could see the Sun organization bought by a team of a group in Houston. We could see so many things. And this just seems ripe for a television show of some sort. But essentially, what seems to have happened is that, the Connecticut Sun, under the Mohegan tribe, as I mentioned, they have fallen behind WNBA standards in recent years. Their arena seats about 9,000. They do not have a private practice facility. In fact, the players practice at what is basically a rec center gym on the reservation, and it is sometimes shared with birthday parties. Not ideal for a professional team. And players have complained about this, and it's been tough. So they started exploring a sale and exploring their options formally at the beginning of this year. What we know is that Front Office Sports, Annie Costabile, who is a friend of our program here, a former guest, has reported that the Mohegan tribe accepted this $325 million bid from Steve Pagliuca, who it's important to note, is a minority owner of the Boston Celtics who made a bid to buy the Celtics outright.
Yeah, didn't get him.
This last year didn't get it. Bill Chisholm got it for $6.1 billion. So that's a subplot of this. There's subplots to the subplots here. So according to Annie, the tribe accepted this bid and presented it to WNBA Commissioner Kathy Engelbert in July, but nothing happened with it after that. She did not take it to the WNBA Board of Governors. And in the month since, the exclusivity of that deal has waned. So the Mohegan tribe can now talk to other potential ownership groups. What you've got on the WNBA side is, and I'll stop monologuing in a second, the fact that they have just given out 3 expansion franchises for $250 million each that we will see debut in the next few years. There were a lot of bidders for those expansion franchises, though, and a lot of legwork going into these new markets. And Kathy Engelbert and the WNBA seem to have an affinity for kind of keeping control over who gets the next WNBA teams. There seems to be discord that Boston could get a WNBA team before some of these other ownership groups who have been bidding. But of course, there's a big difference between expansion franchise and moving a current franchise. And especially because Boston and Connecticut are both in the New England area. So it's a very similar market you're moving to, just a bigger one when you're doing that move from Connecticut to Boston. So what's unsure is if the WNBA Board of Governors would approve this move, which would have to happen in order for they would have to approve the move of the team. The Mohegan Sun can't just sell it because it does count as a move. We do know there's another ownership group run by Mark Lasry, who used to own the Milwaukee Bucks, sold that team a few years ago. He has a very competitive bid that would move the team just to Hartford, Connecticut. So I don't think that would need the same level of approval or would count as kind of as big of a move, more just like a new arena within the same market, if that makes sense. Because it would still be the Connecticut Sun. That bid is said to be very competitive, upwards of $300 million. And so that's going on as well. And I think that's kind of where we are today.
Yeah, I had 2 questions as I was reading up on this. The first is just, how has there not been a Boston franchise to this point, which I understand, or as I understand it, is largely because the Celtics ownership group at the time the WNBA was founded just wasn't particularly interested in having a WNBA team or being involved in one. And that just kind of carried down till now. And then second, wouldn't the league want this? I mean, it seems like the potential for geographic rivalries with some of the existing teams and cities that have franchises would be pretty enticing. And it seems like this policy that the league is citing here in sort of a terse statement, that it gives priority to cities that applied for expansion franchises. That seems like it's just sort of a separate question. As you said, this is a relocation, not expansion. And I know that the league is excited about some of those cities and has talked about Houston maybe being the next destination. But is this just a justification, just a reason to keep this franchise from relocating? Is it something about Boston? Is it something about wanting to keep the continuity in Connecticut? Because it just seems like the fact that the city didn't apply for an expansion club. I mean, one reason why it didn't was because this move was in the works already, right? So I don't totally understand that as a rationale for potentially blocking this move.
Yeah, it's kind of a mess when you look at it. I mean, I think what is happening, this is not reporting, this is my educated guess based on knowing this space so well, is that Kathy is a big part of WNBA ownership is keeping the good graces of NBA owners. Do you know what I mean? Because they still own collectively 42% of the league. And it's clear that Kathy has been giving NBA owners, the 3 expansion teams that are coming are all in cohorts with NBA teams. And the fact is that it seems like Bill Chisholm has told Engelbert that he would be interested in, when the timing is right, having the Celtics officially owning a WNBA team, because Pagliuca, again, is not the majority. This would not be they would play at the TD Garden, they would be a Boston team, but they would not be owned by the same ownership group as the Boston Celtics. So I'm wondering how much of this is Kathy trying to keep these NBA owners happy. The WNBA teams are in limited supply right now. It's going to be a long time before there is another team that is available. There's not going to be a new expansion team on the horizon for at least 4 years. And so how much of that is just like this Connecticut team is kind of the only current leverage to kind of keep these NBA owners who may be interested in the league invested, and she doesn't like that Pagliuca kind of came in and stole the thunder and kind of went rogue a little bit.
This all brings 2 thoughts to me. The first one is that it just seems that it would be best for the long-term future of women's professional basketball for the NBA to unwind its stakes in WNBA teams. Yeah. Like, this just seems like it's a classic incentives problem, and it's tough to force people to sell things. Probably can't in this case, but it does seem unhealthy. The other thing, Lindsay, that you kind of bring to mind is that this does seem kind of like an inversion of the leverage dynamic that typically plays out with relocation sagas in professional sports. Mm-hmm. Like, sports leagues, sports team owners really enjoy the threat of going somewhere else, just taking your ball and going home, because it helps to extract subsidy for stadium projects, mixed use development around those stadium projects that you might have a stake in, parking, whatever. And it kind of strikes me that what we're seeing here is how that only works if the league and the league's team owners are sort of marching to one Machiavellian drumbeat as they proceed, the way that Major League Baseball and the Athletics ownership did so evilly in baseball over the last couple of years. And that might not even work for them, because who knows if they can even build that stadium in Vegas. But if you don't have the backing uniformly of the governors of the league, the owners of the team of the league, it's actually really hard to just move chess pieces around a relocation monopoly board and get exactly what you want. Who knows? Maybe the greatest way to keep sports teams connected to their communities is just the ego of the other owners in this league or any other league.
Yeah, and I think, going back to your point, it's the ever question, like, are people doing what's best for the WNBA or what's best for NBA owners? And I think that a lot of these decisions that are being made right now, and they're not always mutually exclusive categories, of course, like there is a Venn diagram overlap. But at the end of the day, these NBA owners are going to care, bottom line, about the NBA and keeping those franchise valuations as high as possible. And I think, we're getting to the point where WNBA, the WNBA teams have been a rounding error in sales that have involved WNBA and NBA teams, like, the Lynx and the Timberwolves that we just saw, being sold together. But we're getting to the point where these are not rounding errors anymore. Even though, of course, NBA franchises are much more valuable, we're talking, $6 billion. But when you add $325 million to that, like, that's still a significant addition of value to the overall value of maybe your franchise. And, I think we're going to see more NBA owners want that to be a part of their portfolio, because it does add, probably in a few years, $500 million of valuation to their overall pie. But I don't know, like, is it really best to keep the Sun in Connecticut to protect the egos of these NBA owners? That doesn't seem right.
Probably not. Yeah. It's like an accidental way of getting to it's almost like a noble idea, sort of, but also driven by ego, and which prevents a team from being in the most advantageous position to play and to practice.
Yeah, and just, this is kind of ironic that this is playing out this way, because the Mohegan Sun tribe were the first non-NBA owners in WNBA history. When the Mohegan Sun bought their franchise, which they did by buying a team, the Orlando Miracle, who were owned by the Orlando Magic owners, who wanted to get rid of their WNBA team, they ended up changing the WNBA ownership bylaws so that non-NBA teams could get into ownership. And over the last 15 years, it's been a lot of these non-NBA owners, the Seattle Storm, and the Connecticut Sun, who have really kept the league afloat and been kind of pillars of the league. So for now, this to be kind of coming full circle, where the valuations are so big that the question is, which NBA billionaire is going to get in on this now? It's an interesting way to tell the story of the league, I believe. And I also want to give credit to the Mohegan Sun tribe. They have definitely been outspent and not been able to keep up with this WNBA boom. They have been really good to the league. Getting a league in Connecticut, which of course is where UConn's team is based, big hub of women's basketball. It was a really smart decision. And in 2011, they became the first WNBA team to be profitable. So a lot of good history with that organization.
Before we move to the next segment, Lindsay, we wanted to get your thoughts on another thing that's been in the news in the WNBA, unfortunately, which is the epidemic of dildos being thrown on the court. The count is up to 3 now, it seems like. One thing that interests me about this, or interest is probably not the right word, dismayed maybe, is the impact that prediction markets could potentially have on this. Polymarket is offering the ability to wager on whether a dildo will be thrown on the court in a WNBA game. And there's been about $500,000 worth of wagering on that very subject on that site. And that seems like a case of kind of the dystopian scenario of these betting markets or prediction markets actually influencing the events that they're enabling people to, quote unquote, predict, just because the money alone there might actually incentivize people to do this. But there seems to have been a meme coin component to this, in addition to just the base sexist nature of it, which is pretty obvious on its face. So what is your take on why this is happening and what it means?
Yeah, I really hate it. And I was one of those who, when it first happened, I was kind of laughing along with everyone. Oh, haha, like, this is silly. But when it became clear that this was not just like a one-off thing, that this was being orchestrated by bad faith actors across the league, trying to use the WNBA's cultural cachet, but also the cultural hate that the league gets in order to market their meme coin and their crypto scheme. It's just really disgusting. And I think it's an example of, like, as the WNBA is surging in popularity, there are going to be people who want to bring it down to earth in a way. And, I think there's got to be a way to stop this. I don't know how. And you're totally right that these betting markets, can you stop that somehow? I don't think you can, but this is just going in a really bad direction. It's really bad that the players have to deal with this. And just what shitty men who are in charge of doing this, who just, they wouldn't be doing this if the WNBA wasn't surging in popularity and they didn't think they could use that. But they're trying to now be like, oh, but haha, we're going to bring it back to being the butt of these jokes. And we are going to capitalize on homophobia and sexism. And it's awful.
And it ain't funny.
No.
Make a better joke.
It's dumb.
There's lots of funny things you can come up with in the world. It's just not that funny.
It
speaks to a very limited sense of humor.
Yeah.
Very disappointing.
Take a cue from hockey, where people throw octopuses and rats and have fun, whimsical backstories behind their projectiles.
Up next, we'll talk about the piercing of the gender barrier in Major League umpiring. Major League Baseball joined several other major professional sports over the weekend when Jen Pawol broke through the gender barrier in the sport's officiating ranks. On Saturday, Pawol became the first woman to call a big league game. On Sunday, she moved behind home plate, the most consequential umpiring position. Good vibes abounded as the 48-year-old who had worked her way up in the game for many years, including about 10 in the minors, worked behind the plate on a major league field, in Atlanta specifically. Well, Cobb County, we've talked about it. It is excellent news, and I'm not here to find the negative in it, but Hang Up listeners may have noted that the NFL had a woman on an officiating crew as far back as 2015. The NBA hired 2 women as refs in 1997. Then again, the NHL still hasn't had one work a regular season game all these years later. So, Ben, what do you think explains the durability of this particular barrier that Pawol has now broken through? Especially, I'm interested in the comparison to other sports that have already gotten here.
Yeah, it could have been averted. There were close calls a fairly long time ago, and so you think, oh, but for just one woman not making it, we could have had female umps in MLB for decades at this point. But it wasn't an accident that those women ultimately did not get that big league promotion. So you go back to the very beginning, and Bernice Guerra, who was the first woman to be a professional ump, she had to fight for years in the courts to make it happen, and then resigned after one game because of the resentment of other umps. And she said the baseball establishment. And that's kind of been the common refrain with every woman who's followed in her footsteps. The next woman to do it, Christine Wren, said fellow umps didn't support her and that catchers intentionally let balls hit her. The best known of the previous female umps and the one who got closest was Pam Postema. And again, you look at her history and you think, how did this not happen until now? Because she got to AAA one step away in 1983. She umped a major league spring training game in 1988 and yet could not get that final jump to the big leagues. And she talked about the many sexist comments that were directed at her. She filed a discrimination lawsuit after her contract was canceled. And then Ria Cortesio, who was the last female ump before Pawol, she worked a spring training game in 2007, but was released after that season amid allegations that the other umps had conspired to deprive her of a promotion. So it's the same story over and over and over again. And it's not like sexism is unique to Major League Baseball or baseball in general. So you're right. It does stand out that the league is a little bit of an outlier. I guess it's partly that there just isn't that much of a women's baseball tradition, or there hasn't been a high-level league for women's baseball in this country lately. And so maybe a lot of the umping prospects got funneled into softball. Pawol herself was a 3-time all-conference softball selection pick at Hofstra. She worked as an NCAA softball ump from 2010 to 2016 and a professional softball ump too. She did also play in the Women's Baseball World Series, which was the predecessor to the Women's Baseball World Cup in 2001. But I guess that could be a difference from basketball, where there's a thriving youth sports aspect for women and girls in basketball. And of course, there is the WNBA, which I guess could have been seen as competition for potential umpires or refs in that case. But still, like, there's just maybe more of a pool to pull from. Not that that's an excuse for baseball. You know, some leagues have more officials. There are more NFL refs than there are MLB umpires. There's 76 MLB umpires, but that's roughly the same number as in the NBA. So I think it's, you know, the pipeline problem, as they always say, combined with just sexism and resistance in this very heavily male-skewed establishment. Plus, you know, there's just no facilities for women in professional baseball. This is something that women still deal with in all kinds of capacities, and that gets used as an excuse or a justification, even though it isn't really one. And I guess the last thing that comes to mind is there is this tradition in baseball. I guess it's not totally unique to baseball, but of just face-to-face confrontation, really. You know, managers yelling at umps and throwing things and kicking things and just getting right up in each other's business. And I guess the visuals of that with a woman, you can understand why maybe male managers would not want to look like that in that situation. But we've had similar situations in basketball even. So that's not unique to baseball either.
Yeah, I'd say when I read this news, I was a little just depressed that this was the first, and I had a hard time almost celebrating it because of that, although it is a moment to be celebrated, and it does seem like the MLB and the teams did a good job of recognizing the importance of the moment over the weekend. But I do think it's hard because, as you mentioned, Ben, there are all these reasons, but they play as excuses when you really think about them. Like, the NFL doesn't have a thriving women's league, over the years, and yet has broken this gender barrier before. But I'm thinking back to conversations I've had with women who are umpires in baseball and softball. And even the uniforms, like, they don't make uniforms in proper sizes for women to participate. And of course, the protective gear and everything is more intense than just the polo shirt and pants that you wear when you are reffing in other sports. So I think there's even more systemic issues that kind of play into this. And it's interesting. I mean, this uniform and gear issue has come up time and time again when speaking with women who are working in umpiring. And, you don't think about things like that. At least I don't.
Yeah, I mean, I read similar stories even about female astronauts not being able to get gear that enables them to spacewalk or just not be exposed to vacuum because there's just less demand there. But in baseball, yeah, I mean, that's an issue, I think. And, as I mentioned, just like changing facilities, you're an umpire, you're on these all-male crews. There's needs to be like a locker room for umpires. And in this case, there might need to be 2, and places just don't have that. And so that just becomes an additional impediment. And it's such a long season and so isolating, and there's so much travel. And so to go it alone and do that without the support, forget about the players and the managers, but also the fraternity, which it has been a fraternity up to this point, of male umpires who just have not gone out of their way and in some ways have actively opposed previous female umpires who were rising through the ranks and have kind of closed ranks to prevent them from advancing, seemingly. And, this time Pawol has really put the time in and has been umpiring professionally in the minor leagues since 2016 and has just climbed each rung, one after another, got to AAA, became a AAA crew chief, worked spring training games, was clearly in line for a promotion. And so it's kind of like MLB has done with measures like the pitch clock and rules changes. It's just like test it so extensively that no one can possibly object that this won't work or that there's no history because it's just been demonstrated, and everyone's pretty universal in their praise of Pawol and her professionalism and her skill as an umpire. And, based on the initial feedback, I mean, it's funny. She appeared to blow the very first call that she made behind home plate on Sunday. She was on the bases in a doubleheader on Saturday, and then Sunday, maybe it was first pitch jitters. There actually is a documented history of umpire accuracy. Male umpires, their first game behind the plate, they tend to do a little bit worse than they do subsequently, which is understandable, and especially given the intensity of the spotlight on Pawol here. But, then she settled down and she missed some pitches just like every umpire does. And it's just, as soon as you see an umpire blow a call, it's like, okay, I guess she belongs, At least that's the cynical view that a lot of fans have because they're constantly getting on umpires for making mistakes. But, the players, the managers, I don't want to say they were walking on eggshells. I think they did legitimately approve of this and actually were sort of excited to be part of this or to be in that game that she was working. But, you're not going to get the most vehement objections probably in that first game. So we'll see how it goes. I expect that she'll be a perfectly competent umpire. Of course, she's back in AAA for the moment because she's a roving umpire. This was a call up, a cup of coffee, essentially. And now she has to wait again to get another opportunity and hopefully become a full-time umpire at a certain point. But, it's just a rite of passage for any umpire. You miss a call and people get on you for that. And I'm sure that Jen Pawol wouldn't want it any other way.
No, I do think that we're going to see, well, I don't think we're going to see, I know we've already seen a lot of the culture warring that is unfortunately so endemic to anything about women in sports go on with this. Like the 91% accuracy that she put out on her first game was right in line with what rookie umps typically do in their debut games. And, you know, you're still going to see the viral, terrible tweeting about how the first call of the game was blown, as if every umpire doesn't do that, and as if Major League Baseball hasn't been in the process of overhauling its entire system for calling balls and strikes because of the performance of male umpires over well over 100 years of doing it this way. There are just going to be a lot of lines of commentary about women umpiring home plate, particularly, that I think reasonable people are just going to have to ignore.
Yeah.
Yeah, as I said on Effectively Wild, I'm just relieved that we got female umps before robot umps, albeit barely, because we might get ABS in the challenge system next season, so just under the wire. But the ump scorecard for Pawol from the website umpscorecards.com has come out while we were recording. And from them, Pawol got a 93% score, just about 2 fewer correct calls than expected. Not the worst grade that any umpire on Sunday received. Really, I don't know that there's any good faith critique you could make, obviously, and even the bad faith critiques would just seem like such a stretch because this is clearly so overdue. I mean, it's never great when you're a decade behind the NFL when it comes to something involving gender diversity, let alone almost 3 decades behind the NBA. So how could anyone object? Like, this is clearly a case where baseball is sometimes a trailblazer when it comes to diversity, but in this specific case was way behind. And this is not even a case where, women have really made a lot of inroads into the game belatedly and still underrepresented in a lot of other capacities, but on-field coaches in uniform, obviously one GM, former Hang Up guest Kim Ng, and one of the objections that people would levy against coaches, for instance, or minor league managers who were women was, this often comes with a background of having been a high-level player. And that's less true today than it ever was, that you don't necessarily need to be a player to have been a former big leaguer, to be a manager, to be a hitting coach or something. But historically, that was often the case. And so that was another barrier. You can't even say that about umpires, though. It's not as if umpires all played baseball at a high level or that there's anything physically that a woman would have a more difficult time doing being an umpire. So there's just really no argument you can make.
Yeah, I just want to mention that we've got, as this was in the news, there was also news of a female soccer referee in Mexico being subjected to so many death threats over a call that the Mexican president had to step in and issue a statement in support of her. And so, female referees and umpires are under a different level of scrutiny, and it's maximized, and it can get to dangerous places when you do combine it with the, patriarchal nature of sports and the almost maniacal energy that fandom enlists in so many of us. So I just give credit to all of the female umpires and referees out there. I'm not, it's the level of scrutiny in a job that literally nobody seems to like, male or female, and to have that heightened scrutiny. It's not for the faint of heart. And I'm glad we're seeing progress, but I hope we also continue to see pipelines and protections in place.
Cheers to that. That's all for this episode. We also have a special bonus show that is in the podcast feeds right now for our treasured Slate Plus members. It's about an odd thing in the modern National Football League, a season in which the Kansas City Chiefs are not only not favored to win the Super Bowl, but aren't even next on the odds makers list of teams most likely to win it all. To hear that, you can subscribe to Slate Plus on Apple Podcasts by clicking Try Free at the top of our show page, or visit slate.com/hangup+ to get access wherever you listen. The episode is available right now, and we will see you over there. Our show notes are at slate.com/hangup, and you can email us at hangup@slate.com. And don't forget to follow the show and rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Our producer is Kevin Bendis. For Ben Lindbergh and Lindsay Gibbs, with thanks to our guest RJ Ochoa, I'm Alex Kirshner. Remember Zelma Beatty, and thanks for listening.